few weeks, and about, just our own responses to life and the world, and also thinking about what would be wholesome, what would be useful in terms of teaching. And as we talked together, we pretty much were covering all of the Dharma. That it was just like, it really is a moment in our lives, in our world, in our practice, where our whole practice really comes to bear. Everything we've been studying, everything we've been reading, everything we've been practicing, it's like, well, that's what we do now, that. And as we were talking together and really kind of just feeling the expansiveness of what we might offer, multiple times we said to each other, well, maybe we should just talk to each other. Maybe we should just have this conversation, whatever conversation it was that we were having, only we'll have it with you. And so we decided to just do that. That we're just going to kind of talk to each other here tonight and talk to you about the ways that we see the teachings, the Dharma, our practice, really informing us now. And for each of us, I think I said this last week, for each of us it'll be a little bit different. So you can kind of feel your way into what of the teachings, what of the practice is yours to do these days. So we'll just talk to each other as soon as the microphone gets put together.
My microphone's falling apart, but it's working.
Aren't we all? I mean, that's just it, Really, I mean, we're all kind of falling apart here. But we're still working, that's right.
What our practice points us to is a way to be in this life with all the vicissitudes, all of them, the gains, the losses, the pleasure, the pain, the fame, the ill repute, the whole deal. With a balance and an open heart. And each of us could go through a litany of things that have happened in our life that we didn't particularly want, didn't plan on, and had to navigate it one way or another. And this particular election happened. Events change. But these practices for more than 2 millennia have been a refuge for people through war, famine, genocide, everything that you could imagine, dislocation. And they serve in so many different ways. When I think back on my life and some of the obstacles to overcome, and I like, when working with students, I like to say, well, we're all on a kind of hero's journey. And there are moments in your life where, boy, you've got to bring everything you've got to the best of your ability to work through it. And I can remember when the medical staff said, well, you've got cancer, okay. I can remember betrayals in relationships and divorce, deaths of close friends, suicides, troubles in business, issues with my children when they were teenagers, trying to navigate that. The whole panoply of life. But there is a refuge in these practices if we can get a little traction with them. And so we have a change of climate. There's a great deal of divisiveness. There's a real sense in the air that things have shifted. There's a lot of fear in certain collectives of people. And the foundational practice, there's so many ways, we were talking about this, there's so many different ways to utilize this practice, these doorways to offer support. But the foundational part of this practice, one of the ways I like to look at it, and we've spoken a lot about it here, all the teachers, is this challenge to us to overcome these feelings of separation, divisiveness. And the Buddha talked about, in many ways, many practices, working internally also. Those fragmented feelings that we might have, the unhealed wounds that in some ways hinder us from expressing our full potential, expressing our full natural wisdom and compassion. And so we work internally. And the practice also demands, more than encourage, that we work externally with those feelings of separation and divisiveness. There's our sometimes feelings of separation from the environment, and all the issues that that's caused. There's feelings of separation through class, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender, disability. I probably left some out, but you get what I'm saying. So in the practice, the challenge is, okay, in a particular situation, I feel separate, disconnected. Can I be with that? Can I just start with that? Can I feel all the feelings that come with that, whether it's anger, rage, fear, whatever it might be? Starting where we are, and then is it possible to begin to find ways to bridge that, to try to understand in new ways, some of the causes of that feeling of divisiveness. And of course, it doesn't mean that these practices ask us to be doormats. It's quite the opposite. And you look at the precepts that have to do with killing and stealing and using more than is your kind of right by the natural balance of things. The dictum of understanding suffering at its deepest level and doing whatever is possible to alleviate it, where we see it, oftentimes requires really strong and direct action. Joanna Macy likes to talk about the three ways of being engaged in this world. One is that you're supporting the cultivation of the change and transformation of your own consciousness and that of others. You come together, you work together, you're raising consciousness. Another way is, if you see harm being done, you do everything you can to stop it. Okay? And the third way is, you use your creative juices to try to develop new, less harmful systems for living in community. And so each of us are maybe inclined in different ways, but we can use our energies to support, to stop. And all of us here are interested in cultivating a wiser, more compassionate consciousness. So maybe I'll just stop there. I can go on and on about this, and these are part of the discussions we've had.
Yeah, and we kind of have gone on and on, as we've talked to each other over the weeks. like to underline something that Pat just said about really starting where we are. Lots of times in difficult circumstances, we can pretty quickly move to some concept. Some concept about what our practice, is supposed to look like, or what our families are supposed to look like, or what my emotions are supposed to look like. And somehow try to navigate speech or behavior around, whatever it is that we're experiencing. But the invitation of our practice really is to start where we are, so that if we don't bring wisdom and kindness, all those qualities that Pat was just speaking of, to our own experience, we really won't be able to be effective. We won't be able to bring it to anybody else. So to see, well, where am I? What's this? What's this? Can I be with this too? I don't know about you, but sometimes in the course of these weeks, I'll find myself with an emotional experience or thoughts, and I have this thought, well, I shouldn't have this, or it should go away. It should, it should be different. But if it should be, it would be. It's this. And when we are with our experience with enough curiosity and clarity, it will change. It does open. It does drop into greater wisdom and discernment. But it doesn't come out of, some kind of concept or idea. It really comes out of, I said earlier, well, we all have our lights on. We're all lights. We're all beings of light. And that includes everybody, by the way. That includes everybody. So that the invitation is to be present enough, kind enough, what's the word, maybe forceful enough, to say, don't do that, to ourselves, to somebody else, so that we don't add more obscurations, but to be able to kind of see clearly this light, this wholeness, this goodness. First in ourselves, and then we bring whatever action that we bring, including perhaps a really forceful, I don't think that's right-ness, but that it comes out of an open heart. And if it doesn't come out of an open heart, we're just adding to the problem. Many of you have heard me talk about my journey with my mother, and very early on, when she had dementia and she was dying, and very early on, I just decided that I would only do what I could do with an open heart. That anything else would just not be healing. So we start where we are, and for each of us, that'll be in a slightly different place. And so we help each other to start where we are. And we don't require, the invitation anyway, is that we don't require one another to be in exactly the same place at exactly the same time. It's all a process. And we kind of, it's just such a journey of helping each other to do that. You want to say something?
In times when it's really difficult, if we can remember, as everything is churning, and I like to kind of sports, permeate my mind a lot. So for me, it's like, okay, time out. What is going on right now inside? What am I feeling? Where is it manifesting in the body? can I be with it with some kindness? And if I recognize that I'm suffering, can I bring some care to myself? Because this really hurts. And spending some time in that direct relationship with the most foundational experience that's happening, there's a magic in it. There's no other way to describe it. There's a purification that's beginning to happen in a way that is magical. There's something about being with what is, even if it is unpleasant, scary, etc., to the best of our ability, that is a purification and a building of strength. And as we repeat those cycles of being with, there's a confidence that builds. And when something else changes, some other wind, some vicissitude changes things, okay? There's a kind of knowingness and a confidence. And as the perspective builds, there also is a spaciousness that can include joy. You know, that the phenomenological field doesn't have to be completely filled, and it will at times. We get totally identified, lost, etc. But being with, starting where we are over and over and building that confidence, you start to notice that, hey, there is some space in here for humor, for joy, even while we're working directly with the most difficult aspects of being a human. You know, these kind of losses and changes that knocks us off our feet. Because there's no way around that. It's the impermanence thing, the anicca. You know, the Buddha talked about, hey, looking at these characteristics of existence, and one of them being foundational is the impermanence of everything. And if we can begin to get that that's the way it's set up in creation, and we can't control everything, and we can't get it all the way we want it and have it stay that way, because that doesn't work for anybody and it's maddening, we start to be able to actually roll a little bit with this activity of creation, nature, that it changes. And it does. And one of the other characteristics of being born is that there is suffering. And we're not going to get exactly what we want all the time. And we can also learn that by trying to grasp on and just clutch desperately to things we like, that causes suffering because everything's changing. In the same way, we exhaust ourselves if the situation is extremely unpleasant and we're just thrashing around trying to make it stop. So there's that razor's edge, this paradox that we're involved in this practice, which is so beautiful. It's like on one hand, oh, I understand everything changes. Look at this. Whole governments, civilizations over time, they come, they go, they disappear. I always I reflect on my trip to Israel a number of years back now. I was out at an archaeological dig, and there was nobody there except the archaeologists. And it had been a place, and talking with them, sitting down in the shade, it was like 100 degrees. They had stuff built over it, but they were working away with their little brooms and stuff. And they were from Europe, and they were from America, and there was different teams, some people from Turkey, all working this dig. I'm blocking on the name of the place. But they had gone through like 17 civilizations, one after the other. And they all probably thought, hey, we got it. We can figure this out. You know, but no, it didn't quite work like that. the power of change and impermanence just keeps rolling. And they weren't even down to where they thought it all ended. You know, they were getting there. But so here we are, trying to do the best we can with our communities, and knowing and reflecting on and feeling the impermanence of nature, and finding ways to see it both internally, externally. We start to get more connected in the flow of nature, as opposed to like tightening down on every little thing that's changing in us. You know, it'd be great if we could stop old age, sickness, and death. Well, we haven't quite been able to conquer that yet. We're all living a little longer due to modern medicine. But, yeah, so, and on the same vein, which makes it so paradoxical, it's not just kind of going along with whatever it is. It's like we have what seems to be will and the ability to like, no, this is causing, to the best of my knowledge, and of course we're always operating with a small amount of information, to the best of my knowledge, this is causing suffering. I'm going to do what I can to stop this. You know, or I've got a better idea. I think this system that I have in my mind, this creative idea, I need to push that forward. You know, so yeah. So there's action, and then there's a kind of laying back into the movement of nature, and this change that kind of come together and seem paradoxical. And that's what makes it so interesting.
Sometimes when we lay back into that movement of change, you know, it can just feel so wrong. You know, that, I mean, you know, we teach all these things, we read all these things, we talk about all these things, we hear all these things. And we go, yeah, that sounds right. That sounds good. Except for this thing in my life, or, you know, except for this thing in my experience. Now that, you know, I have to see a therapist, right? You know, I have to, like, that there's there's just something wrong. And the goodness that Pat's speaking of is that that's the place. You know, that's the very place where the things that we try to hold on to, the constructs that we've created to try to help ourselves navigate, whether it's self and other or this world or whatever, that they start to fall apart, and we just feel like, whoa, this is like really hard, you know. We can talk about no self, or we can talk about the ways that we construct our own realities, but then when we actually, you know, find ourselves in these places, it can be really, it can really feel like quite a ride. And it's important actually that we can identify maybe some resources, some ways of kind of navigating some of the difficulties that can nourish us and can help us along, because none of us does this with some kind of, you know, serenity and, you know, just really like, I don't know about you, but I'm really pretty together about all this. And, you know, that that we really, it's like, okay, what helps? What helps? And, you know, one of the things that helps is other people help, you know, the voice of another. That helps, that can help. Who are the people? Who are the wise people that you look to? You know, there's so much going around on the internet now and in the news. What helps? You know? What helps? What helps you keep your heart open? What helps you find that humor, that joy? What helps? Can you do what helps and don't do what doesn't? That helps. Who are the benefactors? Who are the people who believe in you? Maybe even in the past who have loved you. I did this meditation tonight, well, there's just all this. Pleasant, unpleasant. Who are the beings who love you no matter what? Who are the animals? Who are the beings who inspire you in the world, and the Dalai Lama, or whoever. Who are the beings in your past life that you can recall the kind of quality of presence and be nourished by it? Contemplate those things. The Buddha invites us to contemplate our virtues. Remember, in one of the times, or the night when he was, the night of his enlightenment, and Mara was saying, who do you think you are? Who do you think you are? Think you could be free? Don't be ridiculous. And the Buddha recalled his past lives and the virtues in his life, the goodness in his life. To take some time, recall your virtues. Go to when you were 6 if you need to, or 10, or 12, or 22. The Buddha very, very specifically says, recollect your virtues. And that's what he did that night. It's what helped him deal with the storms that were coming. He said, it's not true that I'm not worthy. There's this. There are these places where I've touched into goodness and really done what Pat is saying in terms of really trying to offer into the world some wholeness and healing. Being willing to really touch into our own capacity at any given moment. To maybe break the rules that we have about ourselves. Remember, the Buddha broke the rule about not taking in nourishment. He said, this isn't working. I need more food. It's really not getting me anywhere other than following a rule that isn't working. I need more food to take in, what is literally, what is nourishing the body, what is nourishing the mind. And to be willing to step back. And the meditation, the invitation was, if you find that it's kind of, if we're kind of gritting our teeth or trying to be something that we think we're supposed to be, to step back, find that place where we can get our ground. And if it means withdrawing for a bit, then do that. I was reading something that, I forget now who it was, but somebody was asking some teacher, well, what do you do when you get overwhelmed? And he said, I go and I look at the mountains. I just look at the mountains. I step back, I step out. And then we gradually look to see, do I have the energy to kind of approach what is difficult internally, externally? And what would it take for me to approach what is difficult? Not making anything or anyone, not closing anything or anyone out of my heart. I can't remember if I said it to you or to last week, but I have a relative, and I know I want to speak to her about all of what's happening, and I also know that I'm not ready. that I would be doing it out of some kind of misguided sense of virtue when I don't really have the energy for it yet. So to look and see, how do we navigate? How do we navigate our own experiences? Can we sort of see, oh, okay, well, there's this, and how can I be with this in a way that's wholesome? Ultimately, the challenge is that there is nothing that is excluded. Nothing that is excluded. Okay, if I tell this story about my story about Derek Black, or do you have something you want to say? Why don't we? Okay, maybe we should do that now. Yeah. Okay, let's do that. Anybody want to say anything? Add anything? Yeah, Joan?
Hold it.
Okay, thank you. Sharon, I'm reminded of a story that I think you've told us several times about being stuck in a subway car under New York City, and the people we are with are our people.
Yeah.
And I feel stuck
Yeah.
on this huge subway car.
Yeah.
And how do we talk with our people?
Beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. It's actually a story that Sharon Salzberg tells, which I have repeated. And I think it was an image that Robert Thurman came up with. He said, "Imagine, that you're in a stuck subway car, and what do you do?" And Sharon was on a stuck airplane, and he says, "Okay, now what?" One of those planes where you're there for 3 hours, and she said, and everybody started to get really cranky, and the babies were crying, and people were yelling, and she said, "Well, these are my people, and what you do is you feed who needs to be fed, and you hold the hands of who needs to be held, and you do what's needed in the way that's available to you. Maybe it's just you share your little bag of nuts with the person who's sitting next to you, but that, so it is true, but in a way, it's not just being stuck, it's actually, it's not even in a way, we just are here with just all of us, and all of this. And any idea that we're separate is illusory. It's and so how do we, so the awareness of the difficulty is actually beginning to challenge the misguided idea. It's like, oh, you mean my sense of my little isolated self, just sort of self-contained, and I can just go eat cheesecake and everything's fine. It's not true, It's just not true. And so we begin to see that, and then we begin to be curious of what can we do. So there isn't like some specific response other than just we start to inquire. Yeah.
More and more people are feeling a kind of sense of urgency, not sure, there's a kind of rising energy, but not sure how to manifest it or articulate it. And that's a really kind of positive kind of internal movement. And I think the more that we can settle back into our body, be with what is, with kindness, etc., the appropriate and wise response and way of interacting will arise. And it comes from the most skillful actions and speech and actions come from a settledness. So the more that we can settle into ourselves and really feel what's happening, the more likely whatever we elect to do will be more skillful and create harmony as opposed to more harm. So that's why these contemplative practices are just so valuable. Not just this one, but there are other valid contemplative practices too. They bring you in, settle, start exactly where you are, befriending these emotions and confusion and not knowing, and resting with that, and out of that will arise. So I find it really kind of exciting in a way that so many people are like, well, what do I do? You know, there's a kind of urgency that I wasn't feeling before. It was kind of like everything's kind of going along, but there's a creative energy when there's this urgency that's up, that's possible. And you all have the practices to really kind of mine your practice to come from a place that will be needed and skillful.
So take a deep dive with that very question. Don't try to answer it too fast or conceptually. You know, what is mine to do? And really let yourself drop into the confusion and the uncertainty and the intention to be wholesome. And hang out there without telling yourself ghost stories, without panicking about what might or might not be going on or what you have absolutely no control over, anyway, in any conceivable world, you know. So let go of the ghost stories and just take a deep dive right into the question. You got more to say about it? No? You looked like you were... No. Okay.
I was just reading Pema Chodron talking about a practice of just like me. Just like me, this person doesn't want to be sitting in traffic. Just like me, to understand where we, at the core, we are so much alike.
Beautiful.
And I think that in what's happening in the political climate, in the social climate, if we can just figure out, start with the basic where we're alike. And the basic of we all want our children to be healthy. We all want, you know, and you go from there, then you can realize once we start figuring out where we are alike, we can try and build from there to understand one another a little bit better.
Right.
And open communication and open discussion from there.
Right.
And that's always been something for me, is it trying to figure out, we are so different, but at the core, neither one of us wants to be sick or in the hospital.
Right.
Nobody
all
wants.
beings want to
right,
be happy.
Right. And
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a nurse, and I sometimes look at patients, and I can't understand them, and they're getting on every last nerve I have, and I think, this person is sick. Nobody wants to have their independence taken away from them. Nobody wants to be afraid and in a hospital bed. So I need to step back, and I
Beautiful.
need to realize that this is where we can be common, and this is what we can work from.
Right. Right. All beings want to be happy. Right. And so here we are in this place where, you know, all beings want to be happy. We say that, you know, may all beings be happy. May, you know, this is like, okay, well, that's very nice, you know. But here's a place where the rubber really meets the road, you know, where we're really called to practice that. I think we should cover all of the Dharma tonight.
We won't all be happy.
You know, a lot of what has been discussed tonight, I was thinking of, and I won't go into a long thing here, is that the refuges.
Yeah.
Everything changes all around us, but refuge in the Buddha, which also can be looked at as our own Buddha nature. the kindness and goodness that we feel inside us when we're not all freaked out and anxious and fearful. We know what's inside of that reservoir of goodness, Or we take refuge in this historical Buddha that taught all these years and developed this amazing kind of psychological, spiritual system for growth and, And we take refuge in the Dharma, which in one sense can be the teachings of the Buddha. In the other sense, it's nature, the very nature of nature. Learning, what is it to be in this creation? How does it work with all this impermanence, etc.? And kind of get closer and connected there. And the third refuge is taking refuge in the Sangha. Those community, that community of people that are kind of interested in cultivating themselves on the path, so to speak. And there's a great history behind us of all those that have brought these contemplative teachings forward back thousands of years, actually, the development of them. So we can take refuge in that. And the Sangha is our friends. In times of confusion, finding some friends and spending time and discussing and supporting one another's practice and way of being in the world. So taking refuge, that's the deal. Everything's going to be changing, but that refuge can be like the rudder that allows us to choose wisely and choose toward harmony. Enough for tonight?
I think so. Good night.